Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Captain Dan Willis. And he's here today to share with us not only his book, Bulletproof Spirit, the first responder's essential resource for protecting and healing mind and heart, but also about healing PTSD. Now, Captain Dan served as a police captain, homicide detective, wellness unit coordinator, and SWAT commander. He is a graduate of San Diego State University and the FBI National Academy. He currently instructs nationwide on trauma, PTSD, and the process of healing. So let's welcome to the show, Captain Dan Willis.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this topic. I mean, my goodness, I think it really needs to be, we all need to take a time out and really hear what it is that you have to say about this.
Well, the whole point of writing the book, Bulletproof Spirit, wasn't just for first responders. I served as a police officer for almost 30 years and retired as a captain. It's really for everyone because everyone in their own lives deals with trauma. You know, and trauma is any experience that has the potential to affect you in a significantly negative way over a long period of time. We all have those experiences, and if we don't learn how to constructively deal with them and process them and to move beyond them, they can really develop into a point to where they can cripple our quality of life.
You bring such a unique perspective to this discussion, and I have to ask you, what initially got you interested in trauma and how it affects not just us in general, but the mind itself and how we can heal it?
Well, initially it was my own experiences as a police officer, and just within a few years, I was really starting to lose myself, becoming more and more indifferent, kind of disengaged with life, disinterested in things, uncaring. I didn't really understand why and what was happening, but it really was the traumatic effects of being a police officer and what we see day in and day out. I kind of all put that together much later on in my career when my agency sent me to the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and that's a 10-week course for senior police management for police managers all over the country and actually all over the world. And one of the classes I took was called Emotional Survival and Spiritual Wellness Issues in Law Enforcement. And that 10-week course really set me on a course of experiences that really significantly changed my career in many, many ways and changed my life. And that's what I'm driven now to share with people. So hopefully they don't suffer and deal with some of the things that I had to, because I was just a 21-year-old kid when I put myself through the academy and became a police officer with just no training at all, no ability to really deal with the horrific things that I was going to be exposed to over the next 30 years.
Well, you do talk about trauma that not only police officers, but like our soldiers and firefighters, EMTs, nurses, you know, everyone that is exposed to, and you're right when you first started the discussion with, you know, everyone has trauma that happens. So the information in Bulletproof Spirit, is that available to everybody, regardless what industry you're in?
It's absolutely available to everyone and most useful to anybody, because in order to have really a true fulfillment in life and get the most out of life, we've got to be able to deal with the negative, bad, potentially destructive, harmful things of life. And most of us really don't have that kind of training or innate ability to do that. And we're all vulnerable. It doesn't matter who we are or what our background happens to be. Everyone is potentially vulnerable to have their brain injured from the traumas of life. And that's what post-traumatic stress really is an injury to one's brain's ability to process a serious critical traumatic incident, or maybe an accumulation of stressful traumatic incidents, to where the brain actually becomes altered and it's injured and it's unable to process life and move on. And that's where the symptoms start to develop.
What are some of the symptoms that we can start to look for in the ones we love? And maybe, if we're listening to this information and reading your book, try to decipher whether or not we have traumatic brain injury.
Well, there are several symptoms. Sleep is usually the first thing that gets affected while traumas and acute stresses are accumulating. And these things aren't only cumulative, they're very, very toxic and poisonous and can, as I said earlier, affect every part of our life. So sleep disorders, sleep difficulties. On average, first responders sleep about 4 hours a day, and your brain cannot function on 4 hours of sleep, not long term. Becoming depressed, despondent, as I was sharing about my own experiences, more and more just disengaged with life. You become more and more isolated, not involved with activities, with people, with things that you really used to enjoy. You just become more and more isolated. And when we isolate ourselves from activities and people that really nourished us and brought newness to us and fulfillment and meaning, that we are really crippling ourselves. And the effects of trauma really tend to make us just want to just turn inside and leave people alone. It affects our communication with people. My ex-wife would say I talked in one-word sentences, which I certainly did not do when I met her. But over the years, as you tend to shut down and be disconnected with emotions and feelings and becoming unable to express them. You do things like talk in one-word sentences and unable to connect with people and to relate to people. Becoming more and more depressed, drinking, substance abuse, because we can't sleep, because we have all these other issues and problems, so we tend to drink to try to relax, get a couple hours of sleep to try to forget. And of course, that tends to make everything worse. Anxiety disorders. People have all kinds of hyper alert reactions to things where they just kind of jump out of their skin at every little thing. They're anxious all the time. They have uncontrollable emotions where you just might cry for no reason, out of the blue. You don't know what triggered it, what you're thinking of, what happened. You just become a totally different person, a person that you can't control your thoughts, your emotions. You can't be the person that you used to be. And if that happens to you in any significant degree, you can lose hope really, really fast. And that's why suicide is the number one cause of death for first responders, is because when you don't believe there's a way to get help and to heal and become whole again, and you're losing hope, and when your brain has been injured and you're suffering some of these effects, it is beyond terrifying. And as I say, you can lose hope really, really quick. So it's really important to be aware of some of these. And I go into a lot more detail about the symptoms in the book so you can catch them earlier. It's never too late, but the earliest that you can be aware and catch some of these things and to address them, then the more likely they are not to develop and become worse.
It's only when we let them go for long periods of time, then it becomes more of a battle, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. And most people, and especially first responders, tend to just kind of bury stuff and hide stuff because we just deal with so much tragedy and heartache every single day we go to work. We just kind of stuff it down and we don't talk about it. We don't try and get it out. We don't try to really process it. We just try to forcibly forget it and ignore it. And you can't not ignore those things that are slowly, like a cancer, eating away at your ability to have a meaningful, fulfilling life, a life of enjoyment, a life of connectedness with others and close, meaningful relationships. You can only ignore that for so long before your life tends to start to fall apart.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we look, especially at first responders, it might seem like there's not really a place where they can go get help, because if I understand correctly, a lot of times if they try to do that through their employment, it could be it could be a detriment to their livelihood.
It potentially can be, and that's a real tragedy of this whole thing. There's a lot of agencies that are doing a lot of really good work at providing support and resources and assistance to their first responder employees, but we just have such a long, long way to go. And what we're working towards is to where if somebody starts to experience psychological or emotional issues or problems, that the agency sees that as an injury, which it actually is. Just like you broke your arm trying to arrest somebody or fighting a fire. I mean, they would support you. They would take care of you. They would give you time to heal and recover and welcome you when you come back. Well, that should be the very same if you're having internal issues and internal wounds and suffering. Is an injury. And we are getting a lot better of treating it just like a physical wound, but there really is so much more that we can do. And if you happen to work for an agency where you don't feel safe, comfortable with going within the agency to get help, you've got to do something then on your own outside. You can't just say the agency's not going to support me, so I just hope this will get better. I can outlast it. You cannot outlast PTSD. It will not get better over time, typically. Typically, the symptoms will just get worse and worse and worse. You cannot outrun an injury to your brain, but you can heal and recover. You can recover fully if you stop and face it and tell somebody, if not your agency, then a therapist, a psychologist, someone who's trained in treating PTSDs, like someone in EMDR therapy, just telling someone that something's going on inside that you don't like and that you might need help. That's not that hard to say. And once we do, we really open ourselves to all the healing ways that are out there that can get us whole again.
Do you find that within the first responder community that a lot of times this is put to the back burner, because they're supposed to be the strong people we go to when we need help?
That's a big part of it. And of course, the first responders think that as well. I'm the one that goes out and saves people. I'm the one that needs to be strong, because if I'm not, people are going to get hurt or die. And sometimes we just kind of buy into this false narrative that we're invincible and we're just people. And we fear, we suffer, we bleed as first responders just like everybody else. And the more that we try to pretend that we're not supposed to be human, the more vulnerable you are to suffer from the things that we experience that no human being was ever meant to see and experience. But we deal with it every single day. And we have to be real with that. And that these are things that there is no magic pill that you just take and you're invincible from trauma. I mean, we are human beings with hearts and souls that suffer when other people suffer. So the more that we can recognize that and really take in that if something's going on that's really bothering me, it's not because there's something wrong with me. It's all because of what has happened to me. And when we experience the things we experience as first responders or victims of serious violent crimes and things, I mean, it would be unusual. It would be not normal if you weren't to develop some issues and things, because that's just how our brains and our central nervous system reacts to traumas. So embrace these things as it's a part of the natural process of recovering and healing, is recognizing that you're a person that can be injured through traumas. And if you are, when you acknowledge it and face it, you can get your life back. Absolutely.
Do you feel that more agencies really need to address PTSD as more of like a hazard of the job and be more proactive in providing, information, awareness, and training?
Definitely, and the trajectory is going in a good direction. California just recently passed a law to where now post-traumatic stress, it's presumed if you develop that after a certain number of years on the job, that it came from the job and is addressed through workers' compensation. I'm not sure, but I think it may be the first state in the country that has acknowledged that. And there are more and more agencies that are doing more for trying to prevent post-traumatic stress and suicide prevention. But the vast, vast majority of first responder agencies throughout the whole country don't even have a suicide prevention program, when suicide is our number one cause of death. We lost about 140 peace officers last year to suicide, far more than all the other causes of death combined. So the more that we stop ignoring what's real and has always been a part of this profession is the devastating effects of trauma and us killing ourselves, hurting ourselves because we don't know how to deal with it. Once we can start doing that and dealing with it, we're not going to be losing anywhere near the number of persons, these heroes, as we have been historically.
Yeah, it takes a really special soul to do that type of work. And, I think as a community that we need to do more and provide more for them. And, gosh, my hat's off to California for making the adjustments that they're making to recognize that. That's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. It's something that has been fought for years and years and years. And I know there are efforts in other states, but I think California may be the very first one that has actually taken the lead and has recognized that. And that, I believe, will really open the door for other states to follow. And I mean, it just makes sense. When in my agency, I had a risk manager tell me once, if my agency, the city, lost a police officer, it would cost the city at least $250,000 more over the years of that officer's life than it would have cost if they were able to remain an officer and they just got their salary for the rest of their career. I mean, it's just pennies on the dollar to be able to provide resources and training and assistance to these heroes in their service so they don't develop post-traumatic stress, or if they do, they can heal from it. And it's going to save all kinds of money. But often administrators get very, very short-sighted. I mean, I know I was a captain, and you're just looking at what's going on right now, right in front of me, and what's my budget for right now, and not thinking more long-term. We spend a little money here. For example, having our officers and dispatchers go for an emotional survival checkup with a trauma therapist once a year, just as a form of maintenance and prevention. I mean, that should be an absolute standard in every single fire agency and police department, every first responder agency. And what little that costs is going to save all kinds of money, not to mention the lives and careers of people on the backside.
Yeah, because we want people who love the work that they're doing to keep doing the work they love, and to be in a place where they are mentally being supported. I think that that's such a huge thing.
Marianne, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because in my training classes, and since the book came out, I go around the whole country in Canada as well, providing wellness training on trauma, PTSD, and the process of healing based on the book Bulletproof Spirit. And I always ask my class, raise your hand if you absolutely love your job. You can't wait to get back into work. And sometimes I won't have one hand raised in a class of 50. Usually it's around 10% or so. They'll raise their hand, yeah, I love my job, I still love it. Then I ask, raise your hand if you loved your job when you first started. And invariably, every single hand immediately goes up. And I always say, well, what happened? Because the job hasn't really changed. And we have some new challenges and things we have to deal with, but the basic job of what we do as first responders is the same, standing up to evil and serving people with compassion to make a meaningful difference in their lives and in the community. That hasn't changed. So what's different? Well, we change, or potentially we can change over the years. And to do this type of work, you really have to love it. You have to find something. It might be different for everybody, but you just have to find something to love about service and helping people and protecting others. You have to, or the job can eat you alive. If you're not driven by your heart every single day with every single call to make a difference in your agency, with your colleagues, to make a difference in the community, then the job is going to eat you alive. And to be driven always to be wanting to make that difference, you have to love what you're doing. And thank goodness I never lost that love for police work. I mean, I've been retired for 5 years, and I think about it every single day. I'm 56 years old. If I could be a street cop tomorrow, I would do it in a heartbeat. I just absolutely loved police work and preventing people from victimizing others. But we really have to really tap into what is it about this job that I am willing to sacrifice potentially my life, my health, my wellness for the good of others. And once you tap into that, don't ever lose it. Remain in tune with that as your primary motivation. And the best motivation factor there is being linked up, connected with the true purpose of human life, which is to serve and to do good, to have the compassion, the will to help other people. And we can't ever lose that, or the job is really going to affect you.
Yeah, I can only imagine how difficult it is when we look at people that are, arriving at situations where maybe some really horrible things are going on, but also when we look at, a lot of trauma room nurses, emergency room doctors. I mean, they're hit with all that too.
Absolutely. There are just so many professions that deal with trauma and just human life tragedies. And I used to always remind myself, and I would tell my officers, we can't save a life every day, but every single day you have multiple opportunities to do a tremendous amount of good and to affect a lot of lives. And the more that we can remember that, and in the midst of that danger or tragedy or horror that we're dealing with, be trying to do some good, then the more that you're going to be able to recover and heal and not lose your motivation and your interest in doing that kind of work. Because there's nothing more fulfilling and enriching than mattering to somebody, to making a difference in somebody's life and seeing that benefit. And we often can lose sight of that, no matter what our job happens to be when we're dealing with human tragedies in life. But that's the number one thing that will help heal us and to keep us healthy and well, is to be driven to make a difference, to serve with your heart, with compassion, with caring, being selfless and giving. That's what's going to prevent your heart from suffocating, because you're putting your heart in your work. It's absolutely essential.
Well, and I think this information's so important, not just for our first responders, but we talked also initially just for everyone going through trauma. You mentioned in your book, you talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and also injury. What is the difference, and can this be healed?
It absolutely can be healed. I've always wondered why they called PTSD a disorder. Because when you think of a mental disorder, you think you're mentally ill, that you're screwed up, that there's something wrong with you. You can't heal from a mental illness. But when you think of an injury, you think of healing from an injury. You think of recovering. You think of becoming whole again. And as we were discussing earlier, it really is an injury to your brain. And traumas can alter your brain and how your brain functions. And the more that we see it just as an injury, then you can realize, hey, I'm not helpless in this. As an injury, like any other injury, I can heal and recover. And people are healing from post-traumatic stress all the time. The greatest tragedy is that most people who suffer from post-traumatic stress, whether it's just a civilian or a first responder, they, first of all, don't realize what they have. Second, they don't realize it's an injury and they can recover. And third, they don't know where to go or how to get help. And that's what a lot of the book is focused on, is those three things. And there are several treatments for post-traumatic stress, but probably the most effective one that I've had done myself, I only had to go one time, and an issue that bothered me off and on for over 25 years has gone away. And that's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. EMDR. It's by far, in my opinion, and what I hear all the time when I go around the country providing this training, the most effective and powerful treatment for post-traumatic stress. I mean, it is really, really extremely effective. And it's not like talk therapy. You will not be going to have EMDR done once a week for 5 years talking about your trauma. I mean, it's a very concentrated, specific method to treat your trauma and the effects within your brain and to help heal that processing part of your brain that has been altered so it is restored, so it can work normally again and you regain control over your life. I've heard many, many stories where people who've been involved in shootings or just horrific things that really had severe post-traumatic stress had EMDR done and were healed. Maybe they only had to go a dozen times or so. I mean, it just kind of depends on how complex your injury is from different layers of traumas, maybe from your childhood all the way through your careers. But you will not be doing it for months and months and months and months. More likely than not, you're going to at least get some relief of the symptoms, if not get well altogether. And if it doesn't work, there's other therapy treatments for post-traumatic stress that are as well effective, just not quite as powerfully effective as EMDR.
Well, I'm so glad that you shared that because I didn't know about EMDR, and I think a lot of times when people think about healing something that sounds as serious as PTSD, they're like, okay, this is going to take years. I'm going to have to see a therapist every week. I might not even want to be sharing this much information with somebody. So it can be a lot.
It can seem pretty daunting, absolutely. And I forgot to mention this, but to find EMDR therapists, there's over 20,000 in the United States. And EMDR has been practiced for over 30 years. It's recognized by the World Health Organization and endorsed by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I mean, it has been out there for a long, long time. They do a lot with our military, with our men and women coming home from overseas. It's just that in my experience, over 90 to 95% of first responders have never even heard about it. So if you just Google EMDR trauma therapist, San Diego or wherever you live, several will pop up. And, some of them specialize in certain things, like they might just specialize with children traumas or first responders or whatever. Call a couple of them and just go and talk. Ask about it. And what I had someone share with me once, he had been involved in a fatal shooting, and for months afterwards, he was seeing blood all over, blood that wasn't there, all over his hands. And he said that I could even feel the stickiness of it. And I washed my hands 10 or 20 times. It wouldn't matter. My hands were just covered in blood, and I could feel it. He would see himself standing in a pool of blood every time he took a shower. He'd see every time he looked at his 5-year-old son, he saw this big gaping head wound with his whole head drenched in blood. I mean, that was his everyday experience for months and months. And think about the trauma, the panic, the emotions you would have if that was your experience. And he shared with me, he said, even though I would close my eyes and I would tell myself, I'm just seeing things, there's no blood, my son's not injured, everything is okay, I would open my eyes and see it. And all the panic and fear and emotions would just overtake me and flood me, because you can't talk your way out of what your brain is saying is real. And that's what can happen from traumas, and that's the injury to your brain. I mean, you can just see things as real that aren't, but experience all the effects of it as if it is real. And somebody told him about EMDR when he was getting suicidal. He had never heard about it, and this person said, just try it, go for a couple times, it won't make your symptoms worse. And that's what convinced him to go. And even with that bad of symptoms, this officer told me I stopped going after 2 EMDR visits because I have never seen phantom blood again. And a couple of years had passed since his treatment. So I mean, that's how powerful this is. At least get information. I mean, the more information we have, the more powerful you are and enabled to heal and make good decisions and to get better. So research it, look it up, Google some trauma therapists that do EMDR and talk to them, and just have an introductory session and learn about it. I mean, if your life has been altered by something bad that has happened to you, you can either live the rest of your life like that, or do something to get better.
Isn't that the truth? And with something as effective and in some ways kind of simple as EMDR, I wouldn't see why people wouldn't want to do that. It's probably just not being aware that that's been around.
Exactly, and not understanding it. It's also not wanting their spouse, their loved ones, their coworkers, their supervisors to think that there's something wrong with them. There's all these issues that are going around in people's minds, but the ultimate overarching issue is you're injured. And if you don't do something to get well, you might not have a life, figuratively and literally.
In your book, you talk about hypervigilance, and I'd love for you to share with our listeners what that is and how that impacts our emotional wellness.
Sure. Hypervigilance is that state of really aggressive alertness that any first responder has to be, because we do a very dangerous job, and there's people out there that will kill us if they get the chance, or will try to injure us. So we have to always be on guard. We have to always be expecting the worst so we can respond and react immediately. Sometimes we get so good at being hypervigilant that we can kind of react and see something coming before it even starts. We're just constantly suspecting the worst, expecting someone to jump out of a car that we just pulled over for a traffic stop with a gun. Okay, how am I going to respond? What's my backdrop? Where's my cover? And we're just constantly thinking like that in order to survive. Well, that's not a normal functioning range for your brain, especially for 8, 10, or 12 hours in a row. So in order to help us out, our brain starts producing adrenaline to artificially elevate us, to keep us hyper alert, hyper aggressive, on top of everything, so we can always respond instantly to stay safe. What happens, though, after 10, 12 hours of doing that, when we come home, the brain doesn't just say, hey, he's off duty, he doesn't need adrenaline anymore, shut it down. It says, hey, since we've artificially elevated him for so long, we need to now produce chemicals that have the opposite effect to bring you way down below your normal feeling range, to where you feel tired, you don't have any energy, you feel physically depressed, you don't want to do anything, you just kind of go home and unplug and get ready for the next 12-hour shift. And then eventually, after 12, 14 hours or so, the body kind of balances itself out, and you start to feel better, you start to get normal again, you're having more energy and feeling normal. But by then, now you're back at work. So you're hypervigilant, adrenaline's being pumped through your brain, your central nervous system, you get off work. Now you feel tired, you don't want to do anything, you have no energy at all, often. And this hypervigilant kind of biochemical roller coaster goes on for 10, 20, 30 years, however long you're a first responder. And it can be devastating, because it will affect your sleep, your ability to fall asleep, to stay asleep without waking up numerous times or fall back to sleep. It affects our mood. It affects our ability to stay engaged with life and active, because often we don't feel like it. So it can really have some crippling effects, and there's nothing we can do to prevent it. It's just part of being a first responder and staying alive. But we definitely can do something to help mitigate it and help mitigate the negative effects. And the best thing we can do is good aerobic exercise consistently, getting the heart rate pumping as hard as it can for a good 20 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week. Does a lot to help the whole mind and body process all those biochemicals and to have us return to feeling normal again. So that's the best thing we can do. But it is a real factor with being a first responder that we have to deal with, or it's really going to affect us.
Yeah, you can see how that would be a vicious cycle, just going through the adrenaline highs and then the crash and the highs and the crash. I mean, it would be hard to sustain that for anybody.
Right, and a lot of our people actually, because when adrenaline's being pumped through your system and you're on top of everything, and it kind of feels good. And I think that's one reason why a lot of our people sign up for a lot more overtime than they should. They just kind of instinctively know, hey, when I'm at work, I feel pretty good. And when I get home, I don't feel so hot. And but we can only sustain that, as you said, for so long until our inner battery just gets so depleted, nothing will recharge it. And that's what we want to try and prevent.
Yeah, without a doubt. So loved ones of first responders, what are some things that they can do that could be supportive and helpful, besides, picking up a copy of Bulletproof Spirit and, sticking it where they're going to see it in the car or something?
Right. There's absolutely a lot that life partners, loved ones can do, first responders. And there really needs to be a partnership between a first responder and their spouse, their mate, their life partner, because these are such unique professions that have so much added stress and traumas and difficulties that if you're not both supporting and helping each other, then you're potentially going to be one of the statistics that say 70% of us are going to end up divorced. I mean, it's absolutely not inevitable that being married to a first responder is going to end up in a divorce or an unpleasant marriage. I mean, I know many that have been married forever and are very, very close. It's just that if you don't recognize what a first responder profession can do to your marriage, then you're really, really vulnerable. I often tell people in my classes, I tell them, look, guys and women, you all remember the anniversary date of when you got hired. You should use that as once a year, a reminder. I need to kind of check in with my spouse and have this conversation and kind of become more self-aware. How's the job been affecting me? Am I becoming more and more isolated? Am I involved and engaged with things as I was the previous year? Kind of just take a self-inventory of how things are going on. But to have this conversation at least once a year. I mean, sit down with your life partner and say something like this. Look, I realize how hard it must be for you to be married to me, because you didn't just marry me, you married the La Mesa Police Department and all the issues and problems and stress that comes along with that. What do you need from me so I can help you get through my career? And sit and listen. I always ask my classes, have you ever had a conversation like that with your life partner? I've given 230 classes to over 5,000 first responders, and I've had 5 tell me they have had that conversation. And your life partner, they will have a ton of stuff to say because you've never asked them that. And listen to them and take it to heart and say something like, I'm really glad you shared that with me. I'm going to do my very best to do this that you've told me that you need from me. And when I fall short, please let me know so I can correct it and do better. And then that opens the door to do something that I never told my ex-wife, is to share what you need from them. So you're both saying what you can do for each other. Because often, with all the shift work and the issues and problems, our limited time together can often turn into where we just end up complaining about stuff. And the conversations are negative, and they're not constructive, they're not helpful, they're not ennobling, they're not enriching the relationship. And that's the other thing that we can do, is focusing in on just positive communication and positive interaction with each other. The other thing spouses can do is, in whatever ways they can, to the best of their ability, is to have a home that we feel safe in, that we don't feel judged in. For example, I know of an officer, after a shooting, his wife, it was about 2 weeks after his shooting, she started yelling at him, saying, what is wrong with you? Your shooting was 2 weeks ago, and you're still moping around the house. Are you going to be doing this forever? Get over it. That's not a very productive, healthy home for the officer. And of course, he was just so devastated by that. But one of the best things our spouses can do is create a home where we don't feel judged or criticized, where we feel safe, a home that we look forward to coming to all day while we're at work. Because if we're at work and we're thinking, all right, I get off in 5 minutes. As soon as I get home, I'm going to get into another fight about why I signed up for that overtime spot, about why I had to work all weekend, about why I had to work during the holidays, about why I like my job more than being at home. We can think of all kinds of things to do besides go home. And basically, they're all bad. So on the other hand, if you're thinking, hey, I get off in 5 minutes, I can't wait to get home, that's going to go a long, long way to your emotional survival and your health and wellness. And our spouses have a lot to do with that.
Well, you have this whole chapter that kind of dovetailed nicely with this discussion is the spirituality of service. And I think a lot of times people don't really realize that there is this spiritual component as well.
There absolutely is a spiritual component to service. And the more that we recognize that and embrace that and really serve within that spirituality of making a difference, of helping people, of protecting life, of serving with compassion, then the healthier that we are going to be. I write in the book and I share in my trainings that if we can just realize that all day long we are making decisions, and often we're not even aware we have a decision to make because we just kind of do things out of habit. But if we can become more aware that everything we do, there are other options, and train ourselves to always do that which is the most compassionate and the most life-affirming for us, that will go a long way to keeping us healthy and well. And by most compassion just means that the most understanding and caring and helpful, the kind that we can be. And life-affirming just means what we're about to do, the decision we're making, is going to actually add to our sense of peace instead of erode it. It's going to add to our enjoyment, to our health and well-being instead of taking it away. So if we have everything be compassionate and life-affirming that we do, that is very spiritual in and of itself. And I have always said part of any first responder's job is an expression of love. Because for the most part, we do it for love of country, serving our country, love of our community, love of our fellow citizens or fellow man, or wanting to help people who are suffering, wanting to protect people from evil, from being victimized. And that's an expression of the heart, and that is very spiritual. And to do that, we need to serve with the kind of the spiritual pillars of compassion and givingness and caring, so we don't get affected by all the negative, bad stuff you're going to experience. Another part of the spirituality of service is connectedness. First responders need to realize it's not us against them, the community. We are the community. We're an integral part of the community. They're part of us. And what I do as a police officer is going to affect just not that member of the community I'm interacting with, but overall the entire community from what goes on beyond that contact. And the more that we are aware of that interconnectedness, of everything you think, say, and do is going to affect other people's lives, then the more positive impact you're going to have. And the one thing I love more than anything else about police work is the tremendous opportunities to do good. And there is a great spirituality in that, in doing as much good as we can to make a meaningful difference, to help our community to be better, to improve people's lives, to help those who are either too drug addicted or too mentally ill or too whatever, to help themselves. And that is what's going to be fulfilling throughout our entire career and to keep us motivated and well.
Is that kind of part of one of the symptoms when, first responders are going through just a really difficult time, is they become a little bit detached from the community, and kind of, integrating that piece back into their lives is kind of part of their healing as well?
Yes, absolutely. And there really kind of is a natural tendency, I believe, to become detached from the community. Because, if you think about it, almost every person we deal with is somebody with problems, or a crook, right? Or somebody trying to get away with something. And there really is only about 2% of the public who are criminals, but we deal with those 2% about 95% of the time. So we tend to become very, very jaded and calloused because we think that's all there is in the world are these negative, evil, bad people who do these horrific things to each other. And that's not reality. And we can kind of become detached from that reality and disconnected from the majority of the people in any community. I don't know what community you're serving. As a first responder, no matter how bad you think it is, the majority of the people there want you there, appreciate what you do. They're just, they don't have a voice. We hear from, the knuckleheads that are causing all the problems most of the time. And the more that we can just kind of realize that we need each other. Right? The community needs to help support the police and the first responders and help understand them and what they go through. And the police and the first responders need to understand the community and their perceptions and how we can better connect with them and to help them solve their problems, to help them live their lives in peace without being victimized. And we really, truly need each other. Wellness is not only an officer safety issue, it's a community safety issue as well, because communities are only as safe as the health and wellness and the commitment and the professionalism and the compassion of the officers serving it.
So how can communities that are concerned about their first responders and care about their first responders help to make sure that they're getting the resources and information that they need, either having you come out and speak or making sure that everyone in the agency has been purchased one of your books? How can they go about doing that?
I think one of the things is for any leader in the community, whether it's civic or religious or business or any other type of component of the community, there's leaders throughout, to have them reach out to the police, reach out to the first responders within their community and begin the bridge. I have always said the main problem why there is mistrust and misunderstandings and issues between the police and the community, it's the police's fault. Because often we don't take the time to connect with the community, to explain, hey, this is what we did and why we did it and why we had to do it. And it was for the safety of everyone concerned. And often we don't even take the time, like when we're out on a scene and somebody comes up to us, say, officer, how come you did, why do you have to do that? Why? And we just say, hey, go back in your house. If you took 2 minutes to explain to the guy what happened, you could probably resolve all of that stuff. So, both sides need to really engage. And it's really helpful if it should come from the police, but really helpful if it begins from the community, just reaching out to the police. And just like you suggested, Marianne, asking for the police to come to their business or to their conference or to their meeting or whatever the situation is. And just talk. Be real with people. Take questions and answer the questions honestly and engage. Not everything's going to be nice and civil and friendly, but when people are talking and engaging, that's how misunderstandings get resolved. That's how things get cleared up, and that's how relationships start to get forged. Relationships are the foundation of human life. We have to have relationships to get anything done, anything good. So reach out and ask. Ask the police department, what can I do as a member of whatever organization or group? What can we do to help support you guys and what you do? And I'm sure they'll have all kinds of ideas and suggestions. And the main point is just not waiting for the other side to start, is take it upon yourself for what you can do, what you can control, what you have influence over, and initiate it and begin that dialogue. That's the problem, is we aren't really talking with each other. We're talking at or past each other, and nothing ever gets resolved that way.
Well, and I would think a lot of times too for police agencies to go to organizations and say, hey, we can use this type of support from you guys could seem a little inappropriate. That's why they probably don't do it. It's really up to the different groups in the community to really come to them saying, hey, how can we help and support you?
Right, exactly. And that's why I was offering that it really should, for the best results, come from the community. Because some police departments do kind of reach out and ask, but I mean, it's just far more effective if the people who really are involved and want to do something, if they come forward, what can I do for you? How can we help you? Like, we're ready, we're willing to do what we can. And the police will have I'm sure, lots of things, or any first responder agency, of ways they can support and be creative. We have to realize that the police aren't the bad guys, and the community isn't the bad guys. We're all human beings, and we're all trying to do what we can to make the most out of life. And we should be doing what we can to make the most out of whatever situation we are in, and how to make it better. Because when we make it better for some people, we make it better for everybody.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, I want to know if, my local sheriff and police department, if they have wellness programs in place for them. And so that's something I'm going to be doing, is reaching out and just, starting that dialogue, because I think it's important to at least get the discussion started.
Absolutely. Just approach them. Do you guys have any type of wellness training or anything? Do you guys have a resource library? Would you be willing to accept if we were to donate, books and resources for you guys to? Would you have them at the police department for your people to access? I mean, agencies love to receive things from the community. So, like I said, once that conversation starts and the asking begins, there's lots of things to do. And while that community is doing things like providing resources or books or whatever it happens to be, as the officers utilize those things and become healthier and well and more engaged with the community on positive levels, then the safer the community is going to end up being.
I think it just is, part of our responsibility as a community to make sure that, our heroes that serve us and are out there every day putting their lives on the line, that we're doing as much as we can to support them. And how important is that? It's just not police officers only. When we were looking at soldiers, I mean, you have a list of people that this really affects.
Right, and sometimes, like, I can't tell you because it only happened a few times, but I pretty much remember everyone in my 30 years of when somebody came up to me and just said, hey, officer, I just wanted to say we appreciate what you guys do out here. Thank you. It means a lot to us. And that goes a long, long way with an officer, because we almost never hear that. What we get is the part of the community that thinks everything we do is wrong. Everything we do is bad. And, you can only deal with that for so long before your whole outlook on things gets tainted. So it just casual encounters like that, where someone just expresses their appreciation, or maybe they just contact the police department, the fire department. Hey, is there something that I can do for you guys? The holidays are coming up or whatever, and just see what they say and engage them. There's such a disconnect in a lot of communities and police, and that really, really is a tragedy, because pretty much, not every, but almost every officer I knew in 30 years got into this because they wanted to help people. And over the years, they might have got jaded and calloused and changed because of the traumas and stuff they saw, but that was their initial motivation. And we can regain that once again as well. And if we have officers that never lose sight of, I came into this job to make a difference and to help people and to protect life, and they engage that, and they don't take things personally. They don't allow the negative elements of a community to hinder all the good that they do and can do. And they stay true to their purpose of protecting life and doing what they can with compassion, and develop those relationships within the community that are going to help them. So they're helping each other. I mean, our community is going to be so much more safer and more enjoyable to live in.
Yeah, all the way around for sure. And, and that's, I think, ultimately where we all would like to be, where we're in this really supportive place of one another. Let's say that we have an officer that's in it could be a firefighter or officer or whoever that's in an agency that they can't report. Do you have like an online course or something that they can take and do themselves?
I do have an online course, and also the way that people can contact me and find out how to have me come personally, or to find out about the online course, or to get a book, they can go to my website, www.firstresponderwellness.com, and all the information is there.
Okay, well, Captain Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It was my pleasure, Marianne. Thank you.
Well, Captain Dan, it's always such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your new book, Bulletproof Spirit, the First Responder's Essential Resource for Protecting and Healing Mind and Heart. If you'd like to learn more about this book, you can at firstresponderwellness.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just what moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Friday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.